this is the world's #2 healthcare market in terms of medical devices on the high end, tech-heavy medical devices that are used in public hospitals. But I want to talk about China on the value chain first. Kind of give us a sense of where China stands on the world stage.
Well, in a nutshell, basically, China is an irreplaceable component of the global supply chain. So it dominates the API space, right? Or the active ingredients, right? The basic ingredients that you have for making drugs, all the way from simple painkillers to drugs needed for chronic pain. So it is, to say that it's a critical component of the supply chain is an understatement. Studies have been done in terms of what the impact would be on the U.S. If that supply chain would be disrupted. And data shows that you can see disruptions in the U.S. in terms of shortages of medication and equipment in a matter of 3 months, and price hikes, et cetera. Right? So it's an irreplaceable component of the global supply chain. Even if you start looking at countries like India, for example, as a replacement, India itself sources 60 to 70% of its APIs from China, right? So at this particular moment, there is no replacement for China when it comes to its critical role in the supply chain.
So we are tracking very closely rare earths, critical minerals. This is one of the major talking points when China meets with the United States in London later today. Is it anything close to some of the shortages or the risks that we're seeing in that industry when it comes to these active pharmaceutical ingredients that China has?
Well, it is difficult to say where we are at this particular point. In terms of its impact, given that we haven't had a clear picture of the full impact of the tariffs yet, right? But what I can tell you is the U.S. has already tried to look very closely at decoupling from China during the Biden administration with a company, but specifically by the name of Wuxi AppTec and its affiliation with the military. But even the sensitivity associated with Wuxi AppTec, when a close look was taken at trying to decouple from that company, it was going to be a major issue or security issue for the U.S. So a workaround had to be found, even though it was found to be a national security threat as a company. But they had to find a solution for that. And that's my assumption is what's going to happen in these conversations. Is when you start looking at the facts, it's going to be a situation where they're going to have to try to find a way to work around these issues.
What about the cost of drugs? Do you think that with the tariffs that have been imposed, of course now on a trade truce, so there's a temporary pause, but what is the impact and the flow through on a potential increase in the cost of pharmaceuticals from the trade war?
Well, it's going to be direct. I mean, it's going to be direct to the consumer, to the U.S. consumer. So just to give you an example, I don't know how familiar your listeners are with the U.S. market, but a product like ibuprofen, for example, is the most commonly used painkiller. And there's no other way than to source the APIs from China, right? So it's going to be a direct impact on the consumer in terms of pricing. Right, and there's no workarounds that I see, given how comprehensive China is in this particular space.
You mentioned India earlier, and India, in terms of its pharma services, it is 20% cheaper than that of China. Do you see India potentially taking a little bit more market share as a result of this?
See, that's what I believe is a mistake when you start looking at the two markets, China and India, right? Because it's not about cost. It's not about cheaper. It's about the knowledge. It's about the scientists. As you can imagine, a lot of pharmaceutical companies who have interest in China have already looked at the impact of decoupling from China. The problem is not about the fact that they need to go and find someone who does it cheaper. The fact that the talent and the size of the talent of scientists in China is unmatched anywhere else in the world. So China is no longer about a price game, right? It's about the fact that they've developed an infrastructure and knowledge and technology, right, that you cannot find anywhere else. And I don't see India catching up in that space anytime soon. If anything, China's looking like it's on its way to overtake the US in certain areas.
It's similar when you talk about the high-tech industry or talk about Apple iPhones, where many industries are just saying that it is China that has the know-how to make these high-tech devices. Now, I bring up China plus one. Many countries are deploying this strategy. What other countries are out there that would be comparable or would come close that could stand a chance against China?
I can't find one at this particular point. I mean, especially if you're talking about pharmaceuticals and biotech. As you mentioned very well, right? The investment that China is making in the R&D space is twice that that the U.S. and that the U.S. has in any other country, right? And then the other component that is very, very important to talk about is the magnitude of production, right? In terms of both magnitude and expertise, I am having a hard time personally finding a replacement for China in this particular space. So you may have pockets like Europe and Japan, et cetera, but in terms of the infrastructure that's already in place to produce the magnitude or the volume of medications required across the world, I'm remiss in trying to find somebody who can replace China. So I would say it's probably up there in terms of criticality, just as much as the high-tech space, if not more.
So do you think this would mean that the U.S. and China would just have to play nice and partner up? But we've seen some deals recently, the likes of Legend Biotech teaming up with Johnson & Johnson. Tell us a little bit more about that and any other partnerships that could result from, of course, the current environment.
Yeah, we definitely see that, if the best practices in the biotech space means that you have to go global. That's number one. Number two is, and China has to be part of that global picture. And Legend is a perfect example with their looking to be very successful drug in the area of multiple myeloma, is a perfect example where you get this technology from Nanjing in China, right? And a company like J&J, Johnson & Johnson, is the one who has the knowledge and know-how of bringing that drug to the market. So this is going to be the model moving forward. So if you remember, as you mentioned, Pfizer, for example, Pfizer and other drug companies are doubling down on China despite all the rhetoric because they understand that there's no way around that.
What about names like Beijing and HUTCHMED? In terms of their FDA approvals, these are all China companies. They have come up, created their pharmaceutical products, and now they're marketing them around, trying to bring them to into the commercial market around the world, looking for FDA approval. Do you see the geopolitics impacting the companies in that regard as a result of the trade war?
Certainly. I think, especially given the administration that is running the healthcare side of our country, I foresee, I hope I'm wrong, but I foresee that politics are definitely going to come into play here in terms of FDA approval. And I'm sure your listeners are also aware of the fact that, Hainan is another way that the Chinese government is looking to get around, the politics and create a zone where drugs can be tested that are not approved by the China regulators but are approved by the FDA. Okay, and this model seems to be working very well. You know, the revenue in Hainan in this particular space has grown by 8-folds since 2019, right? So China is just as much trying to find a solution for this as the U.S. is. But back to your point, yes, I definitely do see, I hope I'm wrong, I definitely do see that politics will come into play.